Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to another month of the Ummatics Colloquium. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you. My name is Usama Al-A'zami of Hamad bin Khalifa University. And inshallah, today's session, we have an esteemed guest from a sister institution within Qatar. So it's becoming a bit of a Qatari affair, Professor Dr. Junaid Qadir. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of our audience members to a session on entitled Towards an Ummatic Vision for Advanced AI. AI, of course, is a theme that is constantly in the news these days, and there's no question that we as an ummah need to be thinking about the place that AI has within the ummah. So what if the technologies shaping our future are not neutral tools, but civilizational actors carrying the assumptions and power structures of the worlds that produce them? This session examines the myth of neutrality in contemporary AI platforms, asking how their design and deployment reflect particular worldviews while marginalizing others. Drawing on Al-Ghazali's model of critical yet guarded engagement with technology, and on Shah Waliullah's philosophy of Irtafaqat, which situates human flourishing across individual, social, and institutional and civilizational layers. The discussion will, inshallah, introduce an Islamic ethical lens for navigating the AI age without collapsing into either technophobia or technophilia. It then turns to the problem of AI coloniality and the deepening of global digital dependency, arguing for al-kullī, or a holistic integrative judgment, to steer AI beyond narrow technical optimization towards moral purpose and societal well-being. Finally, the session considers the challenges and opportunities in envisioning an Ummatic AGI, or artificial general intelligence, one rooted not only in computational dominance, but also in justice, stewardship, and ethical sovereignty. This is, of course, a tall order and a great aspiration. And in the course of Professor Junaid's presentation, we'll learn more about this. So who is Professor Junaid Qadir? He is Professor of Computer Engineering at Qatar University, specializing in human-centered AI and AI ethics. So really the perfect person to give our presentation today. He has published over 250 peer-reviewed articles in leading venues such as IEEE TPAMI, IEEE TAI. Forgive me if I'm reading these not according to the technical manner, and JAIR, and has received major awards, including the IEEE EMBC Prize Paper Award of 2023, the Emerald Literati Outstanding Paper Award of 2023, and Qatar University's Dean's Award for Research in 2024 and for Service in 2025. There's a much longer CV, of course, and he has published with so much publication. He has also got a very, very high citation score and H-index score. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you, Professor Junaid. And the floor is yours, inshallah, for the next 40 minutes or so before we open up for discussion. One final point I'd make is, of course, we welcome at Ummatics the participation of our audience. So please feel free to put your comments in the chat on YouTube, and we will try and address any questions that you have or any pertinent comments we may be able to read online as well, inshallah. With that, please, Dr. Junaid, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Osama. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulih al-kareem, rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri, wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli, Allahumma alhimni rushdi wa idni min shururi nafsi. Alhamdulillah, it's a great honor for me to join this platform and to talk on a very important topic. It also gave me an opportunity how my ongoing research can the theme of Ummatic AI. So just to start, AI or even like Ummatic AGI, not really what we're going to talk about. It's not one single tool that we are going to talk about. It's not like we're releasing a new AI. It's more like an approach to seeing, think about AI, how we should govern AI, what should be the lens we use to look at AI, because AI is a whole ecosystem which is very complex. So inshallah, we will be looking at that. So if my slides can be put up. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The overall topic I've given to my presentation is a multiplex systemics framework for Ummatic AI governance. And the lens or the framework we are proposing is based on something which a classical scholar has mentioned as Khuda Parasti Insan Dosti in Urdu. So this is a very famous scholar from the Indian subcontinent, Shah Waliullah, and his followers, Maulana Ubaidullah Sindhi and other commentators have mentioned that the general Islamic philosophy underlying the religion of Islam is to have these two elements together. So I will talk about our work on what we call multiplex systemics, which has two elements, multiplexity and systemics. I'll talk about both of them, and then we'll use this lens to study AI and all of its complexity to come up with an approach that we can use to ensure that this technology, AI, which is basically philo, anthropos, insan dosti in English. So there's a new word for that, even though there are other terms like this. So there is human-centered AI, human beneficial AI. But the element that is missing from there is being God-centered. So we will look at three different Islamic scholars or Islamic thinkers, starting from Al-Ghazali, Shah Waliullah, and Muhammad Iqbal. We won't have too much time to talk about this in a lot of detail, but inshallah, I hope to follow up on this and maybe write a paper which goes into more detail. Today, I just will highlight this overall framework. What does it mean to look at AI through a multiplex point of view? And why is systemics important for understanding a complex field like AI? So let us start by talking of multiplexity. This is a term that Professor Rajab Santork, who I have been fortunate to work with, has coined to describe the Islamic approach to understanding reality and to develop science, which is, it is multi-level, hierarchical, everything is not at the same level, and we have multiple methods. So multiplex is like you have a unity as well as diversity at the same time. And as I shall explain, when I say multiplexity, we will talk of multiplexity in the horizontal domain, like when we want to do something, we don't want to fall into an either or world, because that leads to polarization, and often for completeness and to understand something in the complex world more holistically, you need to combine different perspectives, different models, different needs together. So the first aspect is both and thinking, and here this refers to managing co-contrarian poles. So I am basically an engineering professor. So in engineering and in sciences, we are more focused on problems that have one unique answer. So these are called convergent problems. But many human and social problems, they don't have a single solution. You don't have, human and social problems are not like mathematics or like logic. So you can think of it in different ways. And in fact, much of the social problems emerge because we think in either or terms about these social problems. But really, we should be thinking in a pluralistic way. And in many cases, you have things that look opposite, but they actually complement each other to make a whole. So, for example, there is day and night. There are men and women. We have complementarity, which is also recognized in other religions. For example, in Taoism, in the Chinese philosophy, we have yin and yang. Similarly, in the wisdom tradition, we recognize that there are also convergent problems and divergent problems. The divergent problems, they are not problems to be solved in the usual sense. They actually have tensions that have to be balanced. So these are ongoing issues. And AI ethics is something like that. So education is like that, politics is like that, where we have multiple competing needs and things evolve over time. So if you try to have a technical solution, the technical solution will eventually lead to some other problem in the longer run. So we need to take this dynamic approach. For instance, we have often competing complementary needs. For example, we want to be innovative, but we also want to be safe and we want to take precaution. In Islam, we want to be rooted, but we also want tajdeed because matters are always evolving. We want autonomy for the individual, but we also want collective welfare. So the key here with multiplexity is to think about having both of these poles together by managing this in a way that is accompanied by wisdom. In addition to this, so this thing, both-and thinking, is actually recognized in the management field, and it's also recognized in creativity. We know that people who are more creative, they are both-and thinkers. They expand their options by thinking not in categorical either-or terms, but they can think of combining things and coming up with new opportunities, new options. So that is one aspect that is well covered, but the vertical multiplexity thing is something that must be emphasized as well, that not everything is at the same level, not every value is of the same significance. And often we have something like a master-emissary relationship where you have one value that must be managed under the guidance of another value. So you have higher principles and you have lower principles. For example, in Islamic fiqh, we have the science of priorities, awlawiyat. We have things that are of a higher need. For example, in Maqasid al-Sharia, you have the need to preserve life is a higher necessity compared to other maqsad. Similarly, when we talk of technology, technology actually has instrumental value. It is to be judged in accordance to how it is used and what political purpose it is solving. Is it just to enhance the profit of some corporation, or is it to just extend the domination of some person or some country, or is it for what we refer to as insan dosti? We would ideally like technology to lead to human flourishing at an individual level and shared prosperity, so that everyone benefits from the innovations and technologies we're inventing. And underlying politics, we have metaphysical and philosophical principles, what we refer to as civilizational aspects. So we will see that modern technology has emerged from a worldview which is quite distinct from religious worldviews, and it is not God-centered. And in fact, it assumes an autonomous human being. And now we have the intent of making machines autonomous. We have agentic AI. We want to automate things. So in a way, when we look at the metaphysical, philosophical principles, we'd be better equipped to look at how to analyze technology. So why do we need both? Because polarity management alone at the horizontal multiplexity level fails to see hierarchy, and you fall into this problem, which is usurpation or inversion, where the emissary acts like the master. This is well explained in a book, The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist, who talks about the problem with the Western world, which has become almost universalized, that even our mind, it has two hemispheres and they have different kinds of thinking. So we value analytical thinking much more than holistic thinking, even though holistic thinking actually helps us see the big picture and helps us guide toward the things that we need to do. So both end thinking can be used to understand technology, and it's well known in the field of technology that technology is both a blessing and a burden. But then we don't need to think of this in either or fashion. And often we have people fall into camps. Either they are technophobes, what people call Luddites, or they are technophiles, in which they are so optimistic that they cannot see anything wrong with technology, and they feel that all problems of technology can be solved through technology. But we will see that human and social problems, they cannot be merely solved by technology. Technology can play a role, but every technology, as highlighted by Neil Postman, is both a blessing and a burden simultaneously, not either or. It's like a package. You get something and you lose something. And it could be that the benefactors are different people, different class of people, and the people who lose out are a different class of people. And many a times we externalize the harm to people who we cannot see. So we see the progress, but it actually ravages the psyche of people, or it ravages the planet, and the harms, they emerge only after some time. So this is the first aspect. The second aspect is that we often think in instrumental terms, and we say, okay, technology, AI is just like a calculator. It depends on how you're going to use it, and we'll get used to it. Thinking in a way that technology we should just adjust with technology. It is here and it will continue to grow as if it has an autonomy of its own, and we are powerless before it. So this idea that technology is neither good nor bad, this is something most people agree to, but it's also not neutral. Whenever it is introduced into a system, it has an ecological effect. It changes the roles of different people, and it's simply not the same as it was before the technology was introduced. So we have seen this again and again with different technological interventions. We get some good benefits out of it, but there are also harms that emerge. So we have this package, and no technology is neutral, and AI is going to be like that as well. So we see that even Socrates is play, he's mentioned in Plato's Phaedrus, where there are two protagonists, two people engaging in a dialogue, where there's one person who thinks that writing is the best invention and it will improve memory and it will solve many problems. And there's the other person who recognizes that writing will actually produce forgetfulness in people, and people will just rely on the written word and they will not memorize. And in fact, they will seem to know a lot, but all of their information would be superficial. So from this, the key idea is that both are in fact correct and both are also incorrect. So this is the paradoxical nature of such problems, that you need to think in both and terms, not in either or terms. So we need to balance both of these poles. It is true that writing improves memory. It is also true that writing produces forgetfulness. So we should think in multiplex, both and terms, and think of how can we get the best of both things and not suffer from the worst of both things. In fact, you see a polarity map here. This is a technique used in the field of management. This is the diagram used by someone called Barry Johnson. There are two poles, and we can actually fall into a place where we have the worst of both the cases. So ideally, we should embrace technology and also critique technology at the same time. We should not fall into just one camp. If we just critique technology, the downside of this is you will lose opportunities for positive change. You will have stagnation. You will fall behind global capabilities. But there are benefits of creating technology as well, as highlighted in the figure. It's more human-centered, rights and dignity are protected, risks are anticipated early. On the other side, embracing technology also has benefits like innovation. You have empowered people, you have accessible, scalable, efficient services. At the same time, when we embrace technology, we can have an overreach, we can have surveillance, we can have loss of agency and privacy, we can have widening inequalities. So that, it's not productive to compare the best of something with the worst of the other thing. It's just like how people are polarized into the science versus religion camps. But the real thing is to combine the best of both and to have science that is guided by the wisdom and the normative principles we get from religion. So from here, we see that we actually require wisdom, and we need to loop between the different poles, because if we do not do that, if we are only in one pole, we stagnate and we get into a situation where we see on the bottom of the figure, we have dehumanization and oppression because we fall into the worst of both worlds. So ideally, we want the wisdom to be able to get the benefits of both. And it's only then when you have human-centered flourishing. You need to have this creativity to have the kamal of combining two apparent opposites. When we talk of the AI ethical issues, the general idea I want to suggest is, it is true that AI can empower, it can create lots of opportunities, it can do it can have many good results, it can scale up innovations, it can bring good things to a lot of people. However, it's also true that we have many downsides associated with ethics, with AI. So two major approaches to think about this is, two book covers are shown. There is one book by Reid Hoffman, one of the co-founders of LinkedIn. He has a book called Super Agency, where the idea is we can use AI to enhance our agency. This is a long-standing vision of AI, which focuses on intelligence augmentation. The other camp actually focuses on automation, on machine intelligence, on scaling up things. And the metaphor used for that in a new book, which analyzes OpenAI and its business practices, is of an empire. How an empire is just interested in expanding its profitability, even if it tramples upon the rights of people. It just wants to expand. Later on, I'll use an example where we see how cancer is also something like that, where you have a cell that just wants to expand, and that leads to the death of the overall organism. So empire is one way of thinking about this. Another way is intelligence augmentation. So we need to think of the overall ecosystem, and we can use this typology that has been created by a machine learning researcher who says that AI has many different aspects. You have machine learning, which is quite narrow. You have trained it for something specific. And then you can talk of issues like bias, discrimination, privacy, reliability, safety of models. This is a very different issue from concerns related to the creation of a general AI. So we saw the term AGI being used, which is not a useful concept because in a way, if we just define AI to be something that is able to outdo human beings in certain tasks, you are already able to do that. And in fact, there are many strong critiques which highlight that AI, currently how it's manufactured and how it's practiced, is working in a contained world. And there are fundamental issues with operating in an embodied world. And in the history of AI, this trend has been critiqued a lot. Therefore, these days we don't hear AGI in the academic venues too much. There is another term which has come up, which is called generalist AI, something like ChatGPT, which is not trained for one kind of a question. It has been trained on colossal amounts of data to be able to have a conversation about anything. And it is able to do a fairly good job on most things. However, it's essentially a mirror of the past data that we have, the large amounts of data, the overall collection of all of the knowledge that past generations have produced. And it is able to work on top of that. Some people call it a stochastic parrot, which is accurate in the characterization of how it works. But if we look at the results, those are truly impressive. We also have socio-technical systems where we have large-scale societal and economic impact of embedded AI. So questions like, will we have loss of jobs? Will wealth and power be concentrated? Will we have loss of autonomy? These are another set of issues that emerge. So it would be good to think of these things separately and not to conflate them. This helps us think more clearly about the issues involved. Another point I like to make is, the framework we are proposing is called Multiplex systemics, and the systemic approach is fundamental to understanding AI and how to govern it well. Another reason why we're going to bring Shah Waliullah is that he has proposed a systemic philosophy of understanding Islamic legislation and the philosophy and the secrets behind why there are the prescriptions that we have in Islam, and how we can construct a system that is designed to engender shared prosperity, what we refer to as insan dosti, and what we'll come to later on in the slides. So we find in recent times that AI has been used as an instrument of genocide because it depends on how it is deployed and for what purpose it is deployed. If we live in an unjust world, which is based on a nation-state scenario where we have settler colonialism projects, and we have this Western hegemony, and we have this capitalistic world where might is right, then technology will be used to serve the political system that we have. So it's upon us to construct an alternative which is based on, it is God-centered, it is based on morality and ethics, and it is based for all humanity. We'll come to that later, but we see here how facial recognition systems have been used to enforce apartheid in Palestine, how we see that Palestinians are assumed to be guilty just by the nature of being, so the whole population is being surveilled, and they're all, when you're looking for criminality, you'll find something. And we know that this kind of predictive policing has many negative effects. It harms people. So we see that AI has been used as a facilitator, and the companies, they are happy to change their policies as long as it is profitable. So we see many companies who have actually profited by selling AI to nations that are committing genocide. So the structural cause here is a political and socio-economic world order based on justice, and technology is an instrumental tool. It follows and aggravates and amplifies human institutes and human intent. So if we have an unjust system in place, technology can be used to expand the injustice and to inflict things such as genocide, killing, weaponization. So from this, the moral verdict is that AI is not neutral. No technology is neutral. When guided by partial reason, what we refer to as al-rai al-juz'i, which is a term that Shah Waliullah used, an unjust power, dhulm, it amplifies domination, dehumanization, and mass violence. So we need to move towards something which this topic is about, Ummatic AI. If we have systems that are only optimizing their vested interests, their their knowledge, which is parochial, which is localized, you're doing optimization just for your own self, we see in both these cases, a cancer cell is expanding and it's very efficient in its expansion, but the result is that since it's not really looking at the welfare of the organism, it results in the death of the organism. Similarly, in social media, if we are just trying to optimize for click-through, for ads that they are clicked or videos that are watched, then we see that we have problems such as addiction, polarization, misinformation, and societal breakdown. Democracy cannot work. These are the problems that emerge from selfish, what we refer to, Rai al-Juzzi, optimization that is not guided by a higher telos. So techne without telos is going to lead to detrimental optimization. And we see that in a book by Shoshana Zuboff, who has analyzed modern capitalism as practiced by technological companies, which is referred to as surveillance capitalism. It is inherently misanthropic, which can be translated as the opposite of insan dosti. This would be insan dushmani, hatred of human beings or harming people. So this is a system that intrinsically and inherently is impervious and ignorant of the need to work towards shared human prosperity. We also see here why current secular human-centered design falls short. There are indeed certain movements that are coming up, which is natural because of the natural dialectical process. Humans will see that there is injustice. They will try to come up with something. But what we find is they are human-centered, but then humans cannot be the source of all values. So we need some moral anchors. We need certain absolutes. And those principles we get from a transcendent source, a higher ideal. These frameworks, they're centerless. They leave it to whoever is powerful to define what progress is, what flourishing means. And so this can change. And the hierarchy is either not there or it's implicit, and the powerful are actually the more dominant one. There is no primacy for the ethical. And this has become very clear, and the human rights and the secular humanism, we know how it has been shown to be very selective, and there is human rights for some people, not for others, because the ethics we have currently, the human rights we have, is the human rights of convenience. So if it's convenient to the people who are powerful, we will do it. Otherwise, we will do everything that is needed to just forward our agendas, even if it leads to dehumanization of a whole population, if it leads to the genocide of a whole population. This is why we require an Ummatic AI, not only for the Muslim population in Gaza and Palestine, but for the whole world. Because today we see this happening in Gaza, but it can be anywhere. We need a system that is philanthropic, which is human-friendly. And the way we get that is by being God-centered. Because otherwise, as the Holy Quran says, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. If we see people who have taken their desires as their God, we will see them just harming people, we will see oppression, and this oppression can work at an individual level. It can also work at a larger collective, at a national level, and at an international level. So we have to look at the Ummatic mandate. We see in the Holy Quran, Allah Ta'ala says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. You are the best nation. أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You have been brought forth for humanity. So we have a job to do, not only for the Muslim community. We know that Muslim community is one brotherhood. That's the Ummah al-Ijaba. That's our spiritual fraternity. But we also have the whole humanity, which we have to work towards, and we have to create systems for their welfare. And those systems are technological, economic, ethical, which looks at creating systems that are beneficial for all. So we have this both and here, not Muslim interest or human welfare, but Muslim responsibility for human welfare. We are looking at the Muslim community, but also we have the larger domain of all humanity, which we have been sent forth for. And this is the job of the Vicegerency of Allah, that in alignment with the divine wisdom, we work towards creating a social system based on justice, based on akhlaq, which I'm going to talk about in a little while. So we need to have God-centered morality and philanthropy. This is the Ummatic framing we are working on. These are the two elements, and we see that emphasized in classical Islam, huququllah and huququl ibad. Khuda parasti in Urdu is worshipping God, and we know that the purpose of the creation of man and humans is to worship Allah. But one form of worship is to work towards benefiting all of the creation of Allah. So we have the vertical axis as well as the horizontal axis. We have the transcendent anchor as well as the human welfare. And this is multiplex systemics in action. And I argue that it is only through a God-centered morality or khuda parasti that we can have insan dosti. Otherwise, we will always have vested interest. If it is convenient, we will help people and we will have the charade of human rights. But if it is not convenient, no one will even say a word against entire populations being victimized. So as an ummah, it is our job to stand for humanity, for justice. So this is what we need Ummatics for, and also the Ummatic AI governance framework can be thought of as a polarity map where we have this hierarchy that we need to have this philanthropy or this humanism, insan dosti, but not in a manner that is divorced from God-centered morality. In fact, that is what will empower us to make this on a stable basis. It also gives us this sense of duty to actually go and do something for the benefit of people. Like we saw, ukhrijat linnas, we have been sent for the benefit of people. So this hierarchical thinking we see in multiplex systemics, like I mentioned, has been highlighted in the book The Master and His Emissary and the follow-up book, The Matter with Things, where Ian McGilchrist tells a story of, probably by Nietzsche, that there was a master who was a very wise king, and he sent an emissary to rule a certain area. But then the emissary got so powerful and thought, I don't need the wisdom of the master. And later on, because now he was not guided by the wisdom of the master, he actually subjected the people under him to oppression, and eventually it led to the ruin of the society. So that story tells us that we require the wisdom of ethics, and we require the guidance of ethics and of normative ideals to guide our action. And this has a parallel in Islamic sciences. We have al-kullī, which is the universal reason, thinking for al-maslaha al-amma, the collective welfare of people, and to think of the cosmic order and the divine wisdom as we plan, because there are sometimes things which we do not understand. And it is only in the long run that we see the externalities, what we call iatrogenics. We try to intervene to do something good, but we see eventually many harms come out of it. So it's very difficult for us to know. But when we subject ourselves to divine guidelines, then we are in more secure place. Akal Juzi, on the other hand, is particular reason where we are just optimizing based on our vested interest. So capitalistic Akal Juzi will lead you to ways in which you can have profit, even though it might lead to harm for most of the people, but it will lead to more profit for the capitalist. So we need to have al-Ray al-Kulli guiding al-Ray al-Juzi, and this is the basic idea that Shah Waliullah describes in his book. And Shah Waliullah is, we need to learn more about him, and he's a great scholar. And his book, Hujjatullah al-Baligha, describes not only the secrets of the science of the worship, the rituals, the ibadat, but also how we can form the basis of a just world order, which I'll come to in a short while. Muhammad Iqbal also mentions that ilm on its own can be good or bad. If you cast it on the body for material gains, for your vested interest, in other words, you use it for akal juzi, it becomes a serpent. If you cast it upon the heart, it becomes a friend. And Allama Iqbal is following his mentor Rumi in this, who has lots of similar ideas. So we can also talk of multiplex human ontology, where we see that, and this is something Shah Waliullah describes. So the point I want to make is, if we read a deep philosopher like Shah Waliullah, we will see that before we come to a judgment of what is good and what is bad, we need to think of metaphysics. We need to think of ontology. Who is the self? Who is the human being we are judging the design for? So Shah Waliullah describes that human beings, they are composite of two primary forces. We have Malakiya and Bahimiya, and we require the best of both. It's not that Malakiyat should empower and overpower Bahimiya. We in fact require the animal instinct, the strength to make a change in the real world. So we require the physical as well as the spiritual. That's why a Muslim works for the dunya as well as for the akhirah. And Shah Waliullah describes a tripartite model where we have nafs, which is related to Bahimiya, ruh, which is related to Malakiya, and akal, which is the mediating intellect. And Al-Ghazali has something similar. The general idea I want to come to now is that we need to have akhlaq al-fadila. So we need to have a system for AI which looks at virtues and it looks at ethics. And to understand virtue, we need to see the constitution of human beings. And later on, because we're going to talk of justice and adl, adl requires the harmonization of these opposing forces. The Malakiyat wants to take you up and Bahimiya wants to take you down, but you need to harmonize in a dynamic way. So, and this is always an ongoing competition. So in the work of Shah Waliullah, he talks of 4 cardinal virtues. He says all of the virtues that can be defined, they eventually go back to 4 virtues: samaha, magnanimity, adala, justice, and ikhbat and tahara. The current ethical systems that we have, they only have this worldly focus. So they might define justice, but it is also not defined in a complete way. But they miss on this important 2 aspects of ikhbat, humility before Allah, which is necessary. And also purity, which is something that is needed because we are composite of two faculties. We have malakiyat and we have bahimiyat as well. So to have the right harmonization, we need to have these virtues. And Shah Waliullah in his book talks of tajazub and tasalo, the harmonization problem. I don't have much time to talk about it, but those of you who are interested can look Hujjatullah al-Baligha, where he talks of how people of strong bahimiyat and high malakiyat can do great things, because if they are able to reconcile both, they can do great things. And the task before us is not only just the alignment of AI with human values, but also this internal reconciliation. So I show this here, that in the AI world, we hear of AI alignment. There is an entire field, there are books published on it. But the task is not to just create better machines. It is to cultivate better human beings and just social orders capable of deploying technology with wisdom and justice. Because there is no techno-solutionism. It does not matter how brilliant someone's machine is. If it is in the hand of oppressive human beings and an unjust social order, it will not be bringing any good. So we need to go beyond this. We should think of personal level reconciliation, which is the reconciliation between the Malakiya and Bahimiya, which is the science of Ihsan, which is the science of Tasawwuf, and which is the science of Suluk. And we can think of what it means in terms for AI. So just because we have new technology does not mean that these old sciences are irrelevant. We need to take that and apply it to the modern world. These principles are still valid. We still require personal reconciliation. We also require social reconciliation. So Ummah is one nation. Similarly, if you have one nation, for it to be one nation means it has one ideal. This is what we also hear from Allama Muhammad Iqbal, who has this idea of khudi and bekhudi. You have strong individuals, but then those strong individuals subject themselves to the higher collective, which is the society. And the highest collective we will see is the larger ummah, the human brotherhood. So we also need to have technical, we acknowledge technical alignment is needed, but we also require the personal and the social reconciliation. So Multiplex Systemics has systemics in the title. I don't have much time, but there are fields in engineering and in other fields that take a systems perspective. And Sheikh Jasir Oda has also looked at applying this. He has a new book called the Maqasid Methodology. So complex systems are counterintuitive. They are hard to predict. And there are some ways we can use to study them, but they are often counterintuitive. So we need this literacy to look not only at individual things superficially, but to see the overall underlying pattern, which might be non-obvious, might be counterintuitive. And the key dilemma when we are thinking of technology is called the Collingridge dilemma, that technology at the start is easy to control, but it's hard to predict what the effects of it could be. And now we know with AI, there is something called technical opacity. We have models that work as black boxes. So we do not know how and why they're making the decisions they are making. So in such a world, it's very hard to predict what will be the consequence of deploying something. And we require systemics to look at these things in a holistic fashion. Again, this is something that is very important, and this is why we have it as part of our framework. Ibrahim Musa also has a book, Ghazali, The Poetics of Imagination, where he talks of representational thinking and compositional thinking, and how Ghazali was a model of compositional thinking, where he was able to manage the tensions between different traditions and create something new, which was still faithful to the different traditions. So we require systemic wisdom, not just more data. The Ghazalian way of using technology, I bring it here because Ghazali was Hujjatul Islam. He was also someone who struggled to bring the synthesis of different traditions. And he had a famous incident where he went to a place to learn. And when he was coming back, his written books composed of his commentary was taken away by some thieves. And later on, he recognized that Allah Ta'ala had sent these thieves to teach him a lesson. And so he memorized all of the material he had. But then for some time, he went against this technology of writing. But then he recognized that technology has an ontological effect as well. It's not just you write what you know. Sometimes you write to learn and make sense of what you know. And sometimes you write to benefit people. So in a similar fashion, technology can be harmful for you, but it can also be good for you. So this is the human challenge, that how do you engage with it and how do you make it do good things for you while also being wise enough to be cognizant of the potential downsides. So coming towards the end of the presentation, this is slide 16 of the 19 slides I have. Irtafaqat is the model Shah Waliullah has, which is very much needed today, that we don't just want technology, we want ways of thinking about social collectives. How do we organize our society? So we need to look at various levels. We have families, we have nations, we have our ummah to look at, and we need to do advocacy for that, and we need to work towards being useful for the ummah. So how can we do that? If we are just going to be cogs of a machine that is just implementing capitalistic logic, you might have a very high-paying job. However, it's not going to lead to justice in the world. It is upon us to know the necessary Islamic knowledge, to have the social, economic, political literacy, and then to recognize oppression and dhulm, and to, after acquiring the ilm, work towards removing the dhulm that we have and create a system based on adl. So the Irtafaqat system is very useful in this regard. Those of you who are interested should definitely read this. And he talks of adl and qist and how we can develop a system at all of these levels, ultimately leading to the Khilafah at an international level, which is going to create justice for all humanity. And it is going to be the guarantor of justice within nations and across nations. So let me now come towards a close. Philanthropic AI design requires us to look at how technology is being used. Is it used for liberating people? Is it used for encouraging and inculcation of virtues? Or is it used to enslave people? So many a times we find corporations are just addicting people, enslaving people, surveilling people. So we need to go beyond that, and we can look at shared partners. We have other communities who are doing something similar. The critical AI community is looking at unjust power and transforming towards a more just system. We have humanity-centered design, which is good. However, it's not God-centered. And humanity-centered has this problem that it is not looking to a transcendent ideal, and therefore it is limited and subject to those people who are currently in power and they have the capacity to define the narrative. We have the virtue ethics community. We have indigenous knowledge in the world. So we need to have the ummah as well as pluralism in a way that is going to lead us to a pro-social future. I've mentioned of these things, vicegerency requires us to maintain and uphold the divine balance, the mizan, to foster true freedom, hurriyat, akhlaq al-fadila. These are some of the methods that can be used. So we need to have openness, we need to have transparency, we need to have capacity building, education. We need to move away from the from the capitalistic models to the waqf model, which is not for profit, and it encourages working for the welfare of people. We need to train what Sheikh Rajab calls Dhul Janahain scholars, people who have technical literacy as well as literacy of Islamic sciences. I'm going to now conclude with some description of our related work. Alhamdulillah, I've been working with Sheikh Rajab on coming up with multiplex AI systems. We have some works on education and on healthcare, and these are available online, and I'm happy to also share these with interested people. I recently uploaded a translation of a work of Shah Waliullah, in which the work of Mufti Abdul Khalik of Rahimi Institute has been translated. This is also available online. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation. I talked of the Ummatic mandate. I highlighted multiplex systemics as our framework, which can lead us to God-centered morality and philanthropic AI, what I refer to as Khuda parasti and insan dosti. AI governance is fundamentally civilizational and pluralistic. It's not merely technical. It is technical, but there are also underlying civilizational concerns, metaphysical, philosophical concerns. We require God-centered morality to complete and stabilize human-centered design. So we are taking them as allies, but we also have something to offer, and we must work towards that. And multiplex systemics is ideally suited in our vision for the kind of divergent pluralistic problems we need for Ummatic AI. Just a reminder, Allah Ta'ala tells us, Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. That's our mandate. I hope Allah Ta'ala accepts the discussion, gives us the tawfiq to do good in this regard. I thank you for your attention, and over to Dr. Osama.
And Ameen to your du'as. Jazakumullah khairan, Professor Junaid, for really an extremely wide-ranging and very thoroughly thought-through presentation on just the sheer scope of the challenge with respect to AI, but also some of the conceptual challenges, perhaps drawing on our own tradition in thinking about some of these questions. And I'm very happy to hear you're working with Sheikh Dr. Rajab, who is the Dean of the College of Islamic Studies where I work. So I wanted to perhaps open the floor. I still welcome lots of people who are already commenting in the chat. Inshallah, we'll engage your questions and comments shortly. But perhaps I could start with sort of a series of broad questions and then more specifically tailored questions to what you've been talking about. And perhaps I'll start with a specific question, which is, you drew on figures like Ghazali and Shah Waliullah as two very important scholars from our history. Shah Waliullah, of course, is a notion of the Irtafaqat, I think the 4 levels that you showed. And in a sense, to what extent do we need to, in some respects, develop our own complex theories in the way that someone like Shah Waliullah does, and develop the sort of capacities that are reflected in the great scholarship of figures like Shah Waliullah and Hujjatul Islam Al-Ghazali. to a certain extent, we are sort of, if you'll forgive the expression, we're working in a derivative fashion on the basis of great works which were really at the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of knowledge of their times. And yet, in so many respects, Islamic reflection, discussion, Shah Waliullah, in some respects, with the Irtafaqat, is developing a proto-social science, but we use sociology or social science developed after the Enlightenment by Europeans using terminology. Even the term society, it comes out of that tradition. So we can't even talk about our own communities and our own societies without reaching deep into the history of Europe and the Enlightenment, and then talking about ourselves. So we are imprisoned in a kind of a Eurocentric paradigm. So to what extent can we escape that? And to what extent is that also symptomatic of the challenge of confronting AI from an Islamic perspective? Maybe too specific a question to start off with, but perhaps we can start off with a reflection, since you clearly have been working on this for a long time.
Yes. So thank you for the question. So I think, initially we need to get to the stage, because when we are learning about something, we need to initially get a literacy, basic literacy, like you need to walk before you can run. So the real problem that we have these days is that we have polarization. The people who have Islamic knowledge, they don't have detailed knowledge of technology, and they don't have a detailed knowledge of the philosophy of technology. So I got a project on AI ethics in 2021, and I worked with some scholars, and I tried to look up Islamic philosophy of technology. So there were 1 or 2 books. However, there is very little work on that because, again, these are 2 different camps. If we look at it, we have people from the religious communities who are looking at it, but not much from the Islamic community. So the first thing is you need to, in the words of Sheikh Rajab Zul Janahain, 2-winged scholars. You need to be familiar with 2 different camps, which is, again, the current academia does not really motivate that or incentivize that. However, if we have this ummatic vision, which inshallah, I think we should incentivize our children for it. And we should have this vision that people who are graduating, they should be knowing that, okay, we have people working for the ummah. Let's say there are people who are doing tabligh, there are other people doing scholarship, but we need to have engineers, we need to have technical people, we need to have management people, we need to have people in the media also think of how to bring Islam. And now that Islam will come through a broad scholarship, not just the traditional fiqh. You need to, so that's why scholars like Shah Waliullah and other scholars like him, I'm not really very well versed with other scholars, but I've just tried to benefit from Waliullahi scholars in Pakistan and read their work and to see how those ideas can be applied. And once you understand the Islamic cosmology, philosophy, ontology, these things, they are just, for many people, these might be complex words, but they have to be known before you can make an ethical judgment, because otherwise, like I also do work in engineering ethics and engineering education. There the question is also, in education, you need to know what are you educating for, and then you can judge whether you succeeded or not, and whether this thing is good for that or not. Similarly, what I found also personally, Allama Muhammad Iqbal was very useful because, like Al-Ghazali, he was engaging with 2 different traditions, and he was trying his best to learn from philosophy and Islam at the same time and create something new and unique, which is needed to solve the problems of the time. So like Sheikh Rajab says, we require rooted revival, which is again both and. You need to be rooted to be able to do tajdeed. And to do tajdeed, you need to also know the modern sciences. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, I think, I mean, it's sort of, in a sense, the question requires a project to respond because, as you said, there's a kind of impoverishment of our knowledge, which has become bifurcated. So you described ontology and cosmology and these sorts of terms, and you said this might be complex for people. Well, I mean, the people who in our communities would be able to deal with intellectual challenges are often extremely sophisticated in the STEM subjects. There's no sort of level of complexity that they wouldn't aspire to learning. But somehow Islamic knowledge has become relegated in our communities to, people with special niche interests.
Yeah,
and this is
I think I'll just come in and I'll say, like, this is also because we have this either or thinking that Islamic sciences, and many people actually emphasize this, the opponents of Islam, that Islam is otherworldly. It's for Jannat. If you pray, you will get to Jannah, and that's it. That's the extent of your. However, in fact, we need to know that the social sciences, the ethical sciences are basically making sense of our reality and telling us how to live our world and to create the systems we need. So we need, again, the multiplex approach is very, very interesting and useful. I did not have much time to describe it, but it's very basic in our religion. We ask Allah Ta'ala for hasana in this dunya and hasana in akhirah. So making Jannah as well requires us to do effort for creating a beneficial society here in this world.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, if we want ummatic revival in some respects, I think there is a considerable amount of investment in our communities in STEM subjects, and where we can, direct resources to those sorts of areas, we do. And, for better or for worse, there's a huge amount of prestige associated with it. But we're basically, living this paraplegic life where we've paralyzed the Islamic side of our knowledge, and we've given all of the strength to one side, which is the STEM, which is important. I mean, if you want to advance as a society in global geopolitics, China is a perfect example of how a society can go from being completely beholden to Western power to being on a par with Western power. We do need STEM subjects, there's no question about that. But I think there is a kind of ummatic imperative for us to understand the world in a way that it aligns with our Islamic values. But we cannot really do that unless we've also invested in the other half of the body, as it were. Jazakumullah khairan. Perhaps I can switch gears and ask something a bit more directly related to, in a sense, the title of the presentation. And I've put this maybe in a somewhat provocative phrase, but I don't think so, but maybe some people will perceive it that way. I say, how does the Ummah benefit from a technology that is in the control of our adversaries?
Yeah. So, yeah, this is, again, this is a framing. It's true that the technology is developed and used, like the frontier AI models, the most advanced models. They are not used for Islamic purposes, like Islamic as I defined it, Khuda parasti, insan dosti. So they have basically all of those models. They are capitalistic, they are for profit, and they are in the business of expanding and getting data and so on. So, however, we still require benefiting from AI. So it's very important for us. So I showed this slide where there was this like embrace AI and also critique AI. So maybe in a talk like this, because already, when you go to someone, they will look at you and they will advise you according to your condition. So because of the common condition where everyone is too much optimistic about AI, we emphasized critique more. However, embracing AI is very important as well. However, not just in a following manner, in a taqlidi way, where you just are doing the same thing other people are doing. And ideally, you do require AI sovereignty. You do require to create your models. And obviously, we are behind. So immediately, we won't be able to match. But there are ways we can, the ummah, the Muslim ummah is a large ummah. So if we can have a coalition and we can have regional partnerships, we can pool our resources. We have lots of money. So we can, in fact, if we get united, we can develop indigenous technology. You cannot, like in the Quran, there is a verse which goes something like this. Kallun ala maulahu. You are fully dependent on someone, and wherever the master or wherever the person redirects, the person is redirected. So currently we are in a way where many of us, many of our nations, many of our technologies are entirely dependent. So that's a bad situation to be in. So we need, like, one of the main ideas to have a system of adl, you need hurriyat. So this is again something great about Shah Waliullah. He emphasized the importance of independence. And hurriyat comes when you actually go into the abdiyat of Allah Ta'ala. When you do that, the other systems all fall into place. And you do not try to make people your slaves. You recognize that they are also slaves of Allah Almighty. And you create a system which is not exploitative, which is based on sharing whatever resources the society has, whatever natural resources we have. So I say that, we do require working on it, but at the same time, like I mentioned, we need to develop our ummatic agency as well. And this understanding and literacy, and hopefully, more people would take this up. They will develop. We need a lot of work. Like in university, you talked of STEM courses. Most of our people, the best minds, they go to STEM, medical sciences. They don't study any ethics there. Whatever ethics, there's a single course in most universities, and that is also professional skills rather than ethics. So there's no awareness. So we need to have efforts to create literacy, AI literacy, the critical AI literacy, which I hopefully tried to impart today, where we say you can use it for good, but also there is this harm which you need to be aware of. So be careful and study this more. And you can leverage this. However, you need to be very careful. Careful design is required.
Right. Jazakumullah khair. That's, going to feed into my next question, although just the final point, that you made about ethics, that people study in these subjects and they have no sort of wider understanding. They might do a single token ethics course. And I wanted to say that even that ethics course will be basically grounded in Western theories. It's not even in Islamic. And Muslims, we generally tend to frame our understanding of how we should behave in the world with fiqh and suluk and tasawwuf and those sorts of frames. But it's unfortunately almost unthinkable for an alim to be writing about the fiqh of AI, for example, and thinking about that needs to change as well. In a sense, the bifurcation is on both sides, and that's a major challenge that we face. I think, in some respects, your reading is very optimistic that because it presupposes we can do something to catch up in the AI race, as it were. But let me ask a maybe somewhat challenging and more pessimistic take on this, which is AI is the realm of superpowers. The people with the frontier models are all in the United States, all in Silicon Valley. Europe has produced one or two not very impressive models for the most part. The next big player is very clearly China. So they have been maybe, in general, it's thought that they're 6 months behind. And one of the reasons they are behind is because the the blocking of chips that are, the top class of GPUs from NVIDIA cannot be sold to China. And so that seems to be the way, at least, the global AI arms race is presented. How do we have any chance to compete in a context where we don't have the unity that would be required for centralized sort of policy on these sorts of questions? I know in the Gulf region, there are some very wealthy sovereign wealth funds, and they're investing heavily in AI, but it's all going to be potentially even mutually hostile in some respects. And so in some, how do we compete in a world, in a real world, which is so challenging to bring an ummatic vision to the realms of AI?
Yes, so I did highlight, I think at the heart of it, this is like an ummatic question. Ummatics, as I saw it, was like what politics is to the polis or the usual country nation. This is, ummatics is that for the ummah. So the same issue that we have in other fields, it applies in technology as well. So, and the issue is, like I mentioned, that there is no pure technical solution to it. So the same slow process of trying to work towards improvement, of starting slow. So change requires working at different levels. So for instance, you can start at an individual level, you can start at a local collective level, you can start towards some change at a national level. These are the things that are within your influence, and it's like the next jump you can make, the art of the possible. You cannot suddenly become a power. However, evolution is possible and it takes time. So you need to plan ahead. And I hope we will have bodies like this, and people and coalitions who will have a long-term vision. Because you need to have the political unity. That's a separate, dedicated project we require. And as far as technology is concerned, I think we are, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, we have made some investments, but we require investing also in the education as much as we have. So maybe, we could, even though we're not very strong in the sense of technology, maybe in some niche of the field, you can develop some expertise. There are some countries in the world who are manufacturing very advanced machine, and they just make one part of a very complex machine, and they're profiting a lot from that. So it's not impossible, but it requires planning and it requires effort. I think we should continue to work, and everyone should look at, me and my children and the people I can influence, how they can. And the thing is, these days, you don't have to be in the AI field to think about AI. Every field is going to look at AI. A doctor is going to use AI. Everyone is relying on AI. I'm currently doing a project which looks at the ethics of using AI for mental health. How do we design such AI tools? And people are relying on these tools for, getting advice. So since I'm an educator, I'm focused more on thinking of the required literacy. And I think the key idea I want to just emphasize is that the people who are working towards enhancing the AI capability, they should do that, but also look at the perspectives I've mentioned, so that you are not just following in the footsteps of the Western model, which is only going to increase the ruin. Because you see, currently we are on a path in which in a few years, maybe quite soon, we'll find that this approach to larger and larger models, it's not really sustainable. And we need to have other strategies as well. So we can be inspired from our own tradition and look at appropriate technology, what I refer to as philanthropic AI, looking at human welfare rather than just, because if you just try to maximize the accuracy of your model and everything goes to hell, and you are going to drink up all of the water of a country, and you're going to just abuse people, eventually this thing is not sustainable, and this thing will not last for long. So there would be after some time people looking at alternative models.
So, if I'm correct, you do not. I mean, I'm not a non-expert, so a lot of the time, those of us who observe this from an outside vantage point, we might be taken in by sort of the hype or the sensationalism. But one hears Geoffrey Hinton, the Nobel Prize-winning so-called godfather of AI, talking about the AI taking over, for example, or if not that extreme a scenario which would require sort of robots and so on to probably take humans out. There are the AI job apocalypse scenarios, which I think McKinsey said something like 50% of jobs will be completely automated by 2050 or something along those lines. I mean, what is your do you believe that these sorts of things are completely overblown, the notion of the singularity and superintelligence and the like, or is it genuinely going to be possible for people, even if AI advances considerably, to pivot and say that actually we don't like this anymore, we're going to rebel against it?
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned a few things. So this is, a metaphysical question, whether we would have superintelligence and AGI. Again, it's hard to define what AGI is, and one can have a conversation when you know what the definition is. But the general point I want to make is there are more pressing concerns, like already people are in peril. As of now, we have oppression happening. We have jobs are being taken over. Even amongst our friends, we find that it all depends. So Acemoglu, the Nobel Prize winner, he has a book. He has a couple of books related to, so there's, I think, Path to Progress, something like that, where he talks of how the shared prosperity does not automatically come from a new technology. In fact, most of the time it leads to concentration of wealth more than sharing of prosperity. And we find that again here. It is possible to have shared prosperity, but it requires effort. So there's another book of Darren Acemoglu, Narrow Corridor, which says that on the one side, like you have this catastrophe, like the AGI, superintelligence, singularity thing. There is also the dystopian view that is, it's the reality for many people even today. For some people, it's the reality. They are living in a society where they are being monitored. They are being made to work like robots. So they are monitored, and their jobs are being taken away, and so on. So these are the more pressing things we should worry about. And when it comes to AI, since it's a complex beast, you would have millions of, the number of people we have, they'll have, because it's a projection into the future. And there is no fixed future. We make the future. When we sit together, the choices we make, it decides the future. So in complex systems, we know that you cannot exactly predict the future. You can project trajectories. So even Keynes thinking like almost 100 years ago, he was thinking of unemployment rising and what will people do. And recently I came across this book called Deep Utopia, who also mentions that, when AI and robot is doing all of our work, what will we be doing then? And when things become like virtual reality and AI, and you have technology which is trying to just make you irrelevant. So is that a future we want? So again, we should not believe that these things are determined. Like we have the agency, we can resist. These days, whenever you talk, you have this that, if we don't do it, China will do it, and so on. So this is just one way to shut down the debate. We do have the power to decide, and we should not let people say or tell us we cannot decide. We have to think, like Australia recently made this decision to ban social media for their children. It's something they came after a lot of thinking. Okay, so I'll take one or two questions which I see. So the latest question, I'll take that first. Do you have any thoughts on how generative AI could impact the human psyche and how it can affect people's perception of and connection to reality? Okay, so I do have some work on it. I mentioned that I work in engineering education, and these days we are looking at how people are benefiting from it, and sometimes they're over-relying on it, and they fail to realize, again, the same point I highlighted today. When I showed this polarity map, it's like an infinity loop. You have to go between the two different poles. So if you rely too much on technology, you lose your own human voice. And the text of all of the students, it starts to look the same. So you must remember that you can use AI. However, you need to also ensure that you are building your own skills. So in terms of how it's impacting the human psyche, it's still early times, but the change is, I guess, fundamental. I wrote a paper on engineering education in 2023. It already has more than 1,000 citations. And when I look at how Gen AI has been used in the different fields, we have a lot of material. So everyone is using it. And this question about the human psyche, I currently have a new project on mental health in which we are looking at whether we should trust AI, whether AI can have empathy or not. It turns out that AI can show signs of empathy. It can express words that show empathy, but philosophically, it cannot really feel empathy. So in my work, I do see this issue, and we're looking at how we can reduce this discrepancy between the inside and the outside. I hope that answers the question. The same question, how can we build a God-centered culture of tech innovation instead of just being consumers? So
Right.
I think what I'm going to do myself is I have been working on this project. Initially, it was like Multiplexity is the project of Dr. Rajab. I've tried to enhance it more. I've tried to bring in this complex systems perspective. And what I plan to do is to work on AI literacy more, to develop curriculum, courses, to talk more about this. And so if we train our students with this awareness, maybe some of them will go on and read more of the social sciences as well, because we require a synergy. We require a values-informed technical decision-making process. And the kind of decision-making I'm talking about, it's not a static one-off decision. So you need to continuously look at things. So mainly I'm going to look at this from the AI literacy perspective, but I think we need to take a step towards indigenizing technology as well. I think Qatar, Saudi, and UAE are working towards that. We need more of that, inshallah. So these are the two
if I may
questions
sort of,
yeah.
If I may sort of ask in that connection, is it good enough for individual nation states to operate in this way without the level of coordination that one might see in a unified entity like a China or a United States? And I ask this because of kind of missed the AI train more or less.
Yeah, so my response would be that ideally, yes, we would like to have resource pooling. We would like to, like if we look at Shah Waliullah's framework, if you really want to create a more scalable system, you need to have broader cooperation and you need to have this harmonization. However, that thing is not simple. So it all depends on where we are currently. And ideally, if we can, maybe we pull up with our neighboring countries. We have the GCC region, we have the MENA region, we have the OIC. Unfortunately, we don't work too much together. And in technology as well, while we have a lot of investments, these are just sort of services to the Western powers as well, who continue to enhance their own portfolios and so on. We also have a problem in academia, that academia is being disempowered as well, because the cutting edge research is happening in industry who have the resources to spend. And even the top universities, what to talk of universities in the global south, they don't have matching resources. So this is a problem that is emerging. You have a lot of centralization, you have issues related to monopolies as well. So perhaps over time, there will be a reversal to this. In other previous historical events, we have seen when something gets too big, eventually it's broken down. But we do have this real problem in geopolitics as well as in the academia. I don't have any easy answers except to recommend that we do and we continue to do what we can while we make efforts to make a change.
Barakallahu feekum. I don't know if you answered the question. Do you have any thoughts on how generative AI could impact the human psyche and how it can affect people? Okay, so you did. I apologize for missing that. And there are sort of some other questions. For example, that is there an Islamic perspective? Sorry, that's this is not really AI directed, so I won't linger on it. What I was going to ask in connection to what you just said is, when you have a situation where, as you said, like even universities are being affected, but every sector is being affected to a certain extent. You've said that you were thinking about using it in mental health concerns and so on. And traditionally, one of the areas which was viewed as resilient was where there's human empathy involved. But these can mimic human styles of empathy. So I guess two questions. One is, is this going to destroy sort of, large numbers of jobs? But another question here would be, we very often have a sort of Western-centric, advanced economy-centric perspective on these problems as well, because that's where the literature is coming out. Do you have any reading on how this affects the Muslim world, which is largely in the global south, where there are large numbers of extremely immiserated poor people who are already suffering under the neoliberal system? Does this accelerate? Are there any particular vignettes or anecdotes that you can say of how this is affecting the Muslim world and how we should, as an ummah, react to that? Barakallah.
So in terms of the mental health case and the question of empathy, so that's something I'm looking into. And that really goes to the question of what is the task we're trying to get out of AI. We have this inside outside contradiction even when it comes to students. So for example, when it comes to learning, students now can create artifacts very quickly, even though they might not be even knowing what they are presenting. So there is no learning happening, even though they might appear to be fluent, they might show something. So that is one aspect which is critical, because students can, in a way, cheat themselves out of learning, because it's so easy now to just get your stuff done in education. Many instructors are also not aware of what is possible. So the instructors should also take what I call the both-hand approach. They should look at AI, they should see what you can do with AI. And the thing that is happening is, I also do research, so we do publish papers. And now many of the works which earlier on could be published, now an AI can just do it out of the box. So the bar goes up as well. So even though it appears that it is helping people, in a way, it all balances out, because for new people, there are new ways of making mistakes. So you still require the foundational knowledge. You still require the ability to critique knowledge. You still require the ability to extend the conversation. The AI will give you something, but everyone can get it. So now it's not as valuable. So you need to now ask it more questions, critique it, extend the knowledge through a few iterations, so you have something valuable. Because when something becomes a commodity, it's not as valuable, right? So you need to add some delta on top of that. So these are some of the things I'm observing, that with the AI, again, it's a package. You get some benefits, but at the same time, it's also making things difficult. There's also a lot of literature on automation and human factors. When things become so easy, people also drone out and they don't recognize the mistakes they're doing. So even very senior people, senior academics, our associate dean was showing us a video the other day. An associate dean in Hong Kong recently was sacked because of his paper. It had hallucinated text, and you have lawyers doing this. This is human factors. When something is 99% of the time correct, people zone out, they don't check as much. So these are some of the challenges, which again, I find our multiplex point of view very instructive. You require fast with the slow. So fastness can get you to a certain extent. However, there are some things which you cannot make, you should not make them faster than what they have to be, or they lose their meaning. So this balanced approach, I suggest everyone should adopt it as a student and in their research as well. It's a useful lens to look at it.
So, I mean, I guess two things. One is, just as someone who's observed the trajectory of the AI and has been using ChatGPT for, since I forget, a GPT-3 model, I think that was the one which became very popular. I can see that it has become much, much better over time. So I don't, it doesn't seem implausible to me that it will be able to write full papers before long. At the very least, at the moment, for example, I find myself having very extensive discussions with it over the literature and asking it, searching questions about the literature in the way that I would for a colleague, if a colleague was an expert. But in this case, it's an expert in multiple literatures and multiple fields. And I'm asking it to give me, I'm interested in this particular area. Can you give me all of the, give me the lay of the land in the literature in that field, and tell me what I should be reading, to get up to speed, and also give me a history of that literature, meaning over the last 40, 50 years in our fields in the humanities. That's the kind of temporal scope that we deal with, obviously, is very different. And so I do think that there is what you mentioned about the lawyers being caught out, that was for GPT-3, as far as I recall. We're now at GPT 5.2 thinking.
Even the thing is, AI is not God. It's not omniscient.
Of course.
So it will always make mistakes. And so Gary Marcus, I think, the famous critic of AI, he has a very strong critique of AI. Again, the idea is some people believe like AI will become omniscient. It will never make a mistake. However, there are fundamental problems because it's using past data. And so when you extrapolate and create new findings based on that, it has some limitations. So it's basically, I think, unfair for us to expect it will solve all of the problems of the world. So we will always have to know the knowledge that is necessary. So what I find, you're currently at a level, alhamdulillah, you had your PhD. Now you are in a position you can use AI well. However, if you give such a powerful tool to someone who is learning, someone who is in primary school, someone who is in high school, so they don't yet have the AI literacy to even know that AI can make a mistake. So they might trust AI more than they trust their teachers. And I already see that. So in my class, for instance, the students would come and I would say, you should come to the class. You missed this. And they think that just looking at the slides is enough. Just like how looking at the slides is never enough for an education. Similarly, anytime you cannot rely on a chat GPT or any tool like that. A good human teacher, a good human partner will always be useful. However, we sometimes also have this nostalgia that everything human is great. So it is true that many humans are very poor and AI can do a better job than them. And it is also true, as I was reading a book recently, Dr. Bott, which describes how AI is often very much more empathetic in appearance compared to doctors. And doctors have a very low bar. The reason is they are hard pressed and they don't have time and they have been made into a sort of a robot. So the robot has a low bar to appear more empathetic than. So in a way, the real doctors can learn from AI. So I see that you have this possibility of learning, but they can never be like, we cannot automate learning. We cannot automate development. It cannot be totally outsourced. So that's the point I'm making, that you should use it. But when you just fall into one camp and you think this thing will solve all of my problems, in the polarity map we were seeing in my slide, it's a dynamic process. You need to keep on moving through the different poles. And that, because if you are in one pole, after some time, you need to balance by going to the other pole. And these problems, they emerge over time.
Yes. I hope your optimism is, in a sense, like another reading of that is, okay, well, the students are failing at the use of AI. And these people will ultimately fail out of even getting a job because there's been a kind of AI job apocalypse, a significant number of, there's a significant drop in the percentage of graduate jobs available because a lot of firms are finding that actually the lowest level, the junior staff, the AI is more reliable than they are because they're learning on the job and the AI just can be sort of corrected a little. And my experience is absolutely that 5.2 thinking is better than all the research assistants that I have, right? I mean, this is in no way knocking the research assistants. Some of them use, I tell them, please use 5.2 thinking while you're sort of conducting research and then come and debrief me, but I want to see that you're learning as well. I tell students, and this is probably a debate that you have had at a far more advanced level at your university, that in HBKU, there's no specific policy on the use or lack thereof of AI. But I tell students that, look, if you're going to go into like the real world now, employers will definitely expect you to use AI. So you have to, at the very least, be AI literate. But the way in which I balance that out is that all of our testing are now in the traditional form. You're going to sit exams. And that's the only way, because I don't, anything that you bring to me could be AI. So you have to sit exams and you have to produce it in timed conditions.
Yes.
Yeah. But this is just one sector. This is just the students. You've mentioned doctors. We've already talked about the empathy of a nurse.
Yeah.
So what do you think of the people who argue that this is different from previous revolutions, communications revolutions, etc.? Because this is everything.
Yeah, I think the difference is truly stark. It is quite different from the previous technologies we had. And there is a book called, I think it's called Skill Code by an author called Bean. And he mentions how the novice engineers, the people who are graduating, they're finding a very hard time, because it's true that they don't have, they are poorer compared to the robots and the AIs and the algorithms that are available. And even now, as a researcher, you probably have the same experience. Teaching a student is a more slow process. And often it's frustrating when you have to explain and it takes a long time. But now you don't have to basically get it from the student, because earlier on you would outsource it because you did not have a lot of time yourself. But now with AI, you can do many things on your own very quickly. So it becomes disruptive. And this relational aspect of learning, it's being disrupted, and it is well established. Like in the field of surgery, you have now, previously the novice surgeons would be assisting senior doctors, but now with robots and so on, things are easier without going through the trouble of involving an internee or a learner. So in a way, the learning, we still require going through the process, but the incentives are now changed. Like earlier on, you had to use a student if you wanted to scale up, but now there is this option. So in a business as well, the same thing. If a company wants to scale up, they can just use agentic AI instead of having poor students who don't know the field's knowledge yet, because they just are coming from the university. They have theoretical knowledge, but they don't have the tool knowledge. And 5.2, Claude, and other tools are much more adept at creating software. So we, as a government and as people, we need to think of appropriate incentives that would make people hire the new people. So this is, again, a political choice. It might result in your company not gaining that much in profit, but it's like a service you're giving to the society. Similarly, maybe in the future, we'll have universities mandate that you do not publish papers alone, or maybe you must do this much training of your students. Again, I don't suggest this as a rule, but people would think about how to also think of this and how to involve students in their learning, because using AI and learning the thing itself is two very different things.
Right. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right in the sense that students can cheat themselves out of learning. This is obviously a very university-centric problem. We're both university professors. But I guess the wider ummatic question is, how does that translate into various ummatic contexts? I find us shifting registers very often. So we're talking about the sorts of problems that arise, and the literatures that you're citing, they're all coming from North America, overwhelmingly. And this is the nature of AI, because AI is coming from there. That's where the cutting edge thinking is. The question that we would face as a challenge, because you were saying, governments can make certain decisions to for example, tax these large companies, the biggest companies in the world at this point in time, and redistribute profits once they become profitable to their publics. But we're only talking about sort of 300 million or so people in the United States. If the US government doesn't become beholden to those entities, what happens to an ummah of nearly 2 billion in a sense in that context? And where are our governments who very often are struggling just to survive to the next day? And alhamdulillah, some places like the Gulf countries are powerful, but or are robust, but they're tiny compared to something like the United States. Perhaps we can close off on this kind of reflection on how the Ummah addresses the strategic challenge of AI, if you could kindly share your thoughts, inshallah.
Yes, so I think the general framework I talked about, so if people who are interested in education and healthcare, we do have some work. So all of the things I have discussed with you about education and healthcare, we do have some initial work looking at, this both and, approach to technology, and this idea that it is both a blessing at the same time, this and that, which requires you to think differently, because now the technology is very potent as well. And it's possible that you can outsource your agency to it. And in many cases, it creates this inside-outside paradox that you may appear very proficient. The critique we saw in Plato's dialogue, that you will appear omniscient, but you really do not know anything. So in all kinds of fields, we do have this issue. So taking this perspective and coming up with real concrete case studies, I think that could be a way of developing a more deeper understanding. Later on, we can share these understandings with our colleagues and maybe inform the global discourse as well. And at a larger level, also the same thing. I am from the academia, so I do some research in healthcare, public healthcare, and mental health care. So my explorations have been in these areas. However, the things and the framework we discussed, I think it's quite general. And someone who is looking at leadership, someone who's looking at social science, even someone who's looking at Islamic scholarship. We currently do have a paper under review in which we looked at the performance of these frontier models on Islamic fiqh questions, and we categorized and we got questions from different schools of thought, 7 different schools of thought, and we found very interesting trends. So we found that the hallucination often is in fiqh there are some questions that have clear-cut answers, and there are some things that are mubah, so that, you could choose anything. But there are some things in which you should base it on a principle or a general usul from fiqh. So these are the kinds of things where you have some normative guidelines, but the performance of the AI models was very weak here, and it was often hallucinating. So I think every field should look into both the promise and the perils, and should take this both-and approach and this dynamic polarity management approach, and knowing, again, this is something I emphasize, in multiplex systemics, we also have a hierarchy. There are some things that are more important than the other things. For example, in learning, the inside is more important than the outside in a way. Because if you are just showing off, if you're just cheating on assignments, you're not really learning. So in the long run, you lose. Similarly, in actions, in Islamic ethics, I would say the inside is much more valuable compared to the outside. And that is where we should focus more on. Both are important. So the actions are important as well. The efficiency is important as well, but we should enforce this hierarchy as well. So I hope this was useful to the audience, and I would be very happy to hear from anyone who joined. And inshallah, I look forward to seeing you, Dr. Osama. Maybe we can work together on this field.
I would be greatly honored. Jazakumullah khairan. So with that, I must sort of extend Ummatics' warm thanks to Professor Dr. Junaid Qadir for 2 hours of very illuminating reflection on his area of expertise, which is at the cutting edge of current knowledge.
Thank you very much.
And we look forward to, inshallah, keeping in touch with you through Ummatics, because I think part of an institute like Ummatics, part of our strength is to bring ummatically minded people together to address the problems that the Ummah is facing. I apologize to you and to our audience for the unusual disruption. This happens, in my experience, once every 6 months or so, that there's a fire alarm, and it's almost always a false fire alarm. So I apologize that I had to very quickly leave and disrupt things a little. And I appreciate, Professor Junaid, that you were able to carry the discussion forward regardless. I look forward to welcoming all sort of the audience members to another Ummatic session next month. But until then, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you.